Hey fellow gamers, alright, here it is. So the analysis of PvP matchmaking with the newest update. So coming into this Joppa recruiting event, I was having a lot of good win streaks. I was trying to get the legendaries, so I was having a lot more wins than losses. And with the game formula, it was considering that I was getting much better, so it was trying to match me up with players that are closer to my skill. But when we do this, there's a lot of outliers and considerations that the game doesn't consider, which really affects and unbalances the game. So before I started to do all these stats, I was having a 7 to 10 game loss streak because the game was matching me up with incredibly more difficult and experienced players that I just couldn't compete with from a gear standpoint and level standpoint. So let's kind of go through this. And so before, I was getting matched up with level 15s and 16s before all this. And so you can mostly see that from some of these. So these are all the enemies, opponents I faced and their characters. So app 1, app 2 is the time I faced them. So it's not really per opponent, but per the time I've seen this hero in battle. And then down below, I have the base for all my heroes that I use in battle and their stats. So let's kind of walk through this and show you where the first problem lies. So the first problem lies is that you can rig the game. And you can rig the game very simply by, in the unlimited challenges, just lose as much as you can. Just lose every single match. And that's going to alter the event standpoint. So if we take a look at Halbane, for example, I started out with level 15, and then all these matches after it, I've lost. So the first time I faced him, he was level 15, but then by the end, after 21 times I faced Halbane, the opponents I was facing were only level 5, and this should never happen. So there really has to be a minimum, because these opponents I was facing, I would have to max out the timer and then the field bursting into flames in order to keep losing. And then this wasn't fun for them because there's no possible way otherwise they would be able to win. So that's one thing that would need to be fixed, is there need to be a minimum and a maximum level for your power level that you'd be able to play. So people just can't rig this and go all the way down low on this event, and then the next event they'll start very low again, and then they can just beat them all and then have super easy wins into the next one, and then just repeat the cycle. But also, we shouldn't have it so that every time you win more and more and more, you get faced with difficult and more difficult enemies. Because when you have that, then it comes a point where you can't win anymore. So you were on a very good win streak for a long time, but then all the enemies after for the next few matches, you'll never be able to win because their hero levels and gear are much more advanced and stronger than yours. And then you'll like me, you would have to resort to doing this in order to decrease the level back to an acceptable playing field. So for me, the hero levels that would be I would call a fair battle would be mostly around lower level 14s to level 11s or higher level 10s. I should never be faced against a level 15 or 16 or higher level 14, just because their gears and stats are so much higher, and I would never be able to defeat them. So let's kind of just do like a comparison to show you the stats of the players I was playing against and how it should be balanced. So Halbane at level 15, his attack was 473. And then we look at my Halbane, and at level 11, his attack is 452. So if we were to just kind of scan around all these Halbanes, you would think, if we look at opponent number 5 for Halbane, that's kind of close to where my hero is at. And for the damage is 1344. That's because they have the silver hand sword that he uses. So that's why opponents 6 and 7 are very 5 and 6 are very similar, because they were both using that sword, which is very good, but I don't have it. And then for defense points, my Halbane is 463. And then if we start looking around here and we start looking at defense points for Halbane, Definitely not level 15s or 14s because their defense is around like 500, and that's why definitely the balance should be, I should be matched around players at least around level, let's say 13 for Halbernay, because that's 463. And then if more players were to dedicate more resources into leveling up their gear instead of their character level, a lot of these lower levels I face may actually be competitive against me. But most people prioritize leveling up their heroes more than actually leveling up their gear. So that's one problem that's skewing this. So level isn't everything. I think leveling up gear is much more important than leveling up your heroes because you get so much more benefit stat-wise boost. But then you also come into this turmoil of once you start doing this, then you have these people who are compounding their level boost. So I'm level 11, that's 4 or 5 levels difference, and that could be huge. That's like leveling up gear maybe 1 or 2 levels, so that becomes very unfair. Okay, so let's go down to some of these other characters. So you can see Jarlaxle, good understanding. He's not really used a lot. I've only faced him once in these 30 so matches. And Nayeli's not very popular. So you can see most of the times I played against her, it was really a lower level, or people really don't invest a lot into her. But I think Nayeli's a really good stealth character. So you can see the highest one I've played, the highest damage output Nayeli was doing was 1331 with 394 attack. But my Nayeli has 423 and her damage is 1425. So if you really spend the time to invest in her, she's really good. That also being said, she's a very caveat because she dies really fast. So if you were to compare Nayeli against another character of her level in so-called strength, like a Shyvarith, then you'd be losing all the time because Shyvarith's, her level ups are greatly increased. So if we look at this Shyvarith, I've been mostly playing against higher level Shyvariths because she's one of the first characters, she's with Halbernay are the first characters you get and start to play with. But her leveling up in gear wise and leveling up wise is so much more significant than the others, and most people have her higher level. So that's one of the problems when you start getting matched up with level 11s and 12s and 13s. Every now and then you have these characters such as Shyvarith, which is much higher, and the amount of damage and stoppage she can do to your team is significantly higher. So if you go against her, she could totally end your entire team with a kill, a stun, prevent you from moving. So my Shyvarith is pretty high level for the area I'm at, but even so, she's only doing 1346 damage, but the Shyvariths I'm going against are all doing like 14 and 1500 damage, all the way up in there. So it's super hard in order to defeat her, and especially when you combine that with a high level Halbernay and his heal ability, I just cannot do enough damage before they suppress me and defeat me. So if we look at some of the other characters, so Thomas, he is really good for defense, but I haven't really seen him a lot. Most people seems like they've been playing more Rika, maybe because it's the resurrection ability from that crystal, I don't know. But my Thomas is relatively high level stat-wise compared to some of these other ones. So if we look at these two level 13s, they're doing about 1,000 damage with 640 defense, whereas my Thomas is just below 1,000 with a little bit higher defense because I've leveled up his gear a lot more. I don't use Rika in PvP. I just don't feel like I have the resources to level her up. Plus, combining the way I like to play, I just don't like that slower ability, whereas Thomas, he can move and then have another action to use a lot of his counterattacks, which I like better. And then just finally, Sahrvin. So Sahrvin has a lot of high damage abilities that he can do that can really take you down. So if we look at a lot of the Sahrvins I've been playing against, the amount of damage they can do is 1424 with 436 defense, and that's pretty similar. So if we go and look all the way down the Sahrvins, they're all doing higher level 1100 to 1400 damage. Whereas we look at my Sahrvin, he has a lot of good stats and everything, but he's only doing 1272. So if you combine that with a higher level Shyvana and a Sahrvin, we're talking about massive damage that we can't compete against at higher levels because of the scaling of PvP. So what we really need in PvP is have a lower level minimum based on level wise. So maybe once you reach level 10, you'd never be able to play against maybe other level 10s, or you can scale it based on gear and stats for the entire team's average. And definitely we shouldn't have it so the more you win, there's an endless going forward, no cap. There definitely has to be a cap to reward players that spent the time to level up their character's gear. Because I've spent all this time at level 11 just trying now to focus on my gear more than my character level, because I feel that's more important. But when you start doing that and then you start getting all these wins, there comes to a point in the game where you just can't win anymore, because you're getting matched up with these higher level players that have higher level and higher level skills, and then in the combined as a group they can do so much more damage than I'll ever be able to do. And that shouldn't be a part of the game, because that's not fun, because then I would have to do this entire losing streak, lose about 10 to 20 games in order to get back into a safe spot where I can start being competitive against people with similar skills and levels as mine. So yeah, that's those are my thoughts on PvP and my thoughts on how to fix it. But definitely, if we can at least get a minimum gap and a higher maximum gap for like however you consider power. So I think the consideration should be power, and then there should be power maybe based on the stats or the level of your gear, and then there should be minimums placed and maximums placed based on the gear for level you can play against. And it should also be based on the average of everybody in your group and not just one character. So maybe you have Shyvana really high level, like a level 15, because you like her skills and stuff, but you didn't focus a lot on maybe Faraday or Thomas, and then maybe level 10 with lower level gear. You shouldn't be penalized for having a high level Shyvana and then having play against equally matched other people with all heroes that are similar to just your Shyvana. So those are my thoughts on PvP and why it's unbalanced, and I hope you guys enjoyed. If not, well, let me know in the comments. Let me know what you think of PvP, and if there are any other suggestions that you guys think would make it a little bit better. But yeah, that's it. So have a great day, gamers. Bye.